Hey guys, so in this video I got a request to review Russel Orhii's Powerbuilding Volume 3 program. For those of you guys who do not know, Russel Orhii is really one of the strongest men in the world. He weighs in at 83 kg, deadlifts over 700 pounds, squats over 700 pounds, bench presses in the low 400s. He's won multiple IPF World Championships. He's set national and world records. He's won USAPL Raw Nationals several times, which is arguably more competitive than IPF Worlds for those who are in the know. And Russell's background, he kind of comes from football. I believe that he walked on to the University of Houston, but he kind of found that he liked powerlifting training a lot better than playing football. He's talked about some like podcasts and whatnot. Like I've consumed a lot of his content. Has like one of the most active powerlifting channels on YouTube. Just runs a ton of different really good, he's basically a very good ambassador for powerlifting, and a big reason why lots of people did get interested in the sport. Kind of like a Johnny Candido is kind of what I think of him as in terms of influence for powerlifting. So in this video I got asked to review his powerbuilding program. For those of you guys who are kind of unaware of it, it is I believe it is an 8-week program, which is going to basically be centered around gaining muscle mass and strength. And I'm going to delve into a scientific review of this program, just kind of going over scientific principles of what make a program good. Just a little bit of my background. I'm currently an 82.5 kg lifter in the USPA. Been powerlifting training for like specifically since March. My best lifts are a 485 pound squat, a 342 pounds bench press, and then a 683 pounds deadlift at 82.5 kg, so 181 pounds. I have my degree in exercise science. I also do coaching full-time for lifters. I have a full-time roster of that, and so I do a lot of that stuff. So this is like basically my entire life. So I just wanted to go over this using the main principles of scientific principles of hypertrophy, more so strength training, because this is more so because Russell's powerbuilding program is more centered towards people that are interested in powerlifting. That's probably the people that are going to run this program. So I'm just going to delve into it. So the first principle of good programming is going to be specificity, and specificity is just referring to anything that's going to improve powerlifting performance. And this is pretty broad. You know, there's lots of different things that contribute to maximal force output, like technique, muscle mass, the actual strength, that kind of a thing. And we want to train as powerlifters to maximize all those underlying systems that contribute to strength. And training needs to be specific enough to improve those general underlying systems. So what this program does well and what it doesn't do well. I'm going to first talk about what it does well with specificity. So it does incorporate singles during the program, and this is really great because the sport of powerlifting is centered around singles. That is the actual sport. You need to actually get good at practicing that sport skill in order to get better at the sport. So that's really good. It also has you squatting, bench pressing, and deadlifting. Specifically, you're bench pressing 2 times a week, you're squatting 2 times a week, and you're going to be deadlifting once a week. That's really good. You know, that's a pretty meat and potatoes, more so beginner frequency. It is a little bit more usual in powerlifting programs to have bench being around 3 times per week. But 2 times a week is a good starting spot for most lifters to, you know, at least get some good baseline progression with minimum effective volumes until they need more volume to actually push their bench press. There's also, it's heavy training. It's going to be, most of your work is going to be spent above 70% of your max on the squat, bench, and the deadlift. And there's also plenty of hypertrophy work far out from the test day that does happen on week 8. And that's really great because having more higher volume is going to help improve work capacity, which will improve later on your ability to recover, adapt more quickly to lower volume training when you are pushing intensity harder, and then also just build more muscle mass. Basically, all else equal, if you have more muscle mass, you're going to be able to actually lift more weights. Like one of the biggest differentiators at the top level between lifters that can lift the most amount of weight and lifters that can't is muscle mass. So while it's not like a perfect linear correlation, basically the reason why that happens primarily is because there are more motor neurons that can actually innervate the muscle fibers, and they can produce a larger nerve impulse. And it can also improve your leverages in many cases if you have more muscle mass. So that's what it does well. Now the cons is that I don't see any progression in competition specificity throughout the program. What I mean by that is that it's a pretty general program throughout the entire thing. Not much changes in terms of frequency of bench press, squat, deadlift, in terms of, I guess, more frequent practice. It does have some progression in competition specificity in terms of like getting progressively heavier with the volume work, but it also kind of like it changes, like for some reason like it drops out singles like in like the last like 4 weeks with squats. I don't know why, but then 8 weeks out it has a single and then it drops that. I don't know why it does that. I would keep in that single throughout the entire block and maybe progress from like, you know, week 1 RPE 6 single, week 2 RPE 7 single, week 3 RPE 8 single, week 4 RPE 9 single, then wave load that back down to like a 6 and then whatever, and like add like 5 or 10 pounds. Like maybe that could be a little bit better. It also seems to just generally be more biased towards accessories and bodybuilding as opposed to more strength. And the reason why I say that is just because the overall volume allocation in terms of like maximum recoverable volume, which is basically going to be, we all have, basically it's the general principle that we all have a maximum amount of stress that we can tolerate as individuals and actually recover and adapt to it. And we want to essentially, how I frame this is when you're getting closer to competition and you're getting closer to a test state, you probably want to fill up more of that recovery bucket with, I mean, maybe you're doing, for example, I have a video on this, but which you guys, I'll probably link down below, but maybe you're doing, for example, bench press. You're doing, you know, bench press, incline bench press, close grip bench press, 8 weeks out. And then as you progress, maybe, you know, you're dropping down, you're adding in maybe more competition bench volume for practice, more heavy work on that, more volume just in general, to where eventually you're maybe only like 2 weeks out, you're doing like only competition bench pressing, so you got more practice, more skill, and you're going to be using more of those volume from maybe, you know, those variations like dumbbell bench press to actual flat competition bench press, to have more directed adaptation, which is a sub-program principle of specificity, which is basically the more often you perform a sport-specific task, the better they're going to get at it generally. So that's something I would probably say I would change. It's fine far out, but I would definitely maybe periodize that a little bit better, or to drop out some of the accessories a little bit closer to the meet. And Russell even does that in his vlogs. He even talks about how closer to meets, he does drop out more accessories. He does start to do more competition specific work. So that's a big thing. And then also, like, there seem to be like the accessories change randomly every single week. Like, you're not doing the same thing over and over again. And that's a problem because there's no real chance to take advantage of the repeated bout effect. And that's going to be important because if we have a ton of muscle soreness, which can be, you know, with new exercises, like that's kind of not a very good thing. You know, what I would probably do is, instead of changing all these accessories every single week, like, which is a bi-weekly schedule, like one week you're doing like a goblet squat, another week you're doing like a leg press, I would probably just say, you know, maybe for the first 4 weeks we're doing leg press, and then the last 4 weeks we're doing goblet squat or something like that. That would be a little bit better. Any really good program doesn't just change things willy-nilly. Like, having consistency is important to know like what's working and what's not. So that's my review of specificity. The second principle of strength training is going to be overload. And overload is basically going to be the degree of homeostatic disruption that's caused by training in order to drive adaptations and make sure that you're actually getting bigger and stronger. It can be generated through volume, intensity, frequency, exercise selection, and proximity to muscle failure, like RPE. So what this does well is that it does have linear periodization, and linear periodization is basically going to be, as you approach a testing day in a competition, the volume is going to decrease, but the intensity is going to increase. So it's going to be getting more specific in that way. You're basically going to be lowering down the reps. Like, it starts out with like 8s, and then you go down to like, you know, sets of like 2 or 3 and whatnot for volume, which is going to improve this more specific task of lifting heavier and heavier. Again, like the closer you are to that single, the more specific you're getting to the sport of powerlifting. But again, it's important to also have in your periodization, you're having that general work at the beginning to actually have those underlying systems of powerlifting actually be improved upon. So that's what it does well. Also, there's a sub-maximal overall emphasis on the squat, bench, and deadlift, which is great. There is pretty clear for most research that as long as you're within, I believe the data-driven strength guys say it's about 75% of your run max can basically trigger strength gains regardless of how close to failure that you are. So like if you're doing triples with like 75%, it could be like a 3 RPE. Basically, you have 7 reps in reserve, but you're going to get, you know, lots of strength gains without a ton of fatigue. But I honestly think it's more around 70%. Is like probably the lower end for like overload. And basically, his program progresses from, you know, that 70% to you know, more close to like 85 to 90% towards the very end. So that's a really, really awesome thing that it does do. I would also say that one other thing that it does well is that it does have ranges in percentage. So essentially, it'll say like, you know, between like 70 to 72.5% of your max on this day, which does give some room for auto regulation within the program, because auto regulation is important because one of the underlying problems with any sort of percentage-based program purely, and especially if it's just one specific percentage, is that it doesn't allow for any degree of auto regulation based on your fatigue, based on your readiness for the actual session. So that's one problem with percentage work. Generally, if I'm programming in percentages for athletes, it's going to basically be pretty sub-maximal. Just because I want to make sure that they are not going to be overshooting, that they're able to say sub-maximal. And again, as long as, you know, 70+% of that max, I'm pretty sure that they're going to be getting a good amount of strength gains. So that's really good. However, also they also have the changes in like heaviness of sessions across the week, so it's like non-linear. So for example, in like week 3, the day 1 on squat, you do a 3x8, and then on day 5 you do a 4x5, and you do those both with 75% of your max, but day 1 is going to be harder because you're doing 8 reps instead of 5 reps. So it's going to be able to, you know, a little bit of a, basically it's more low fatigue day, which is really good. That's important for managing fatigue and making sure that you're ready for the hardest sessions when you're ready. That's something that's also really good. Now, one of the cons is that I don't see any sort of RPE component of this program. And I'm surprised by that because I know that this program is probably more so coming from Joey Flex, his training principles, especially with the SBD. RPE is basically going to be a really important part of auto regulation. And RPE is used to make sure you're training sufficiently hard enough, but not too hard for having too much fatigue relative to the stimulus. So that's something that's really important to have. And I would prefer that if he was, and this is what I do with my clients too, I would prescribe them a percentage or an RPE I want it to be at. And I will say, hey, within 5% of this is about, you know, where it should be. But remember, RPE is the most important thing. Hit your RPE, and basically, essentially, as long as your program is sufficiently dosed, you're going to be able to make those adaptations over time. You don't get stronger by forcing weight to the bar. You just try harder, do it harder, and if you add a weight, you get stronger by having enough stimulus and enough of an overload stimulus over time. Within your adaptive capabilities, then you can add weight to the barbell. Then it's just as easy, if not easier, or you sit with the same weight and that feels easier, and then you add weight next week. And that's basically how you know that you got stronger. It's not by trying harder. That's essentially it. Like the barbell medicine guys talk about that. Same with Brian Miner. So that's something else I would change. There's also a frequent prescription of to failure on lots of these accessories. And that's a problem because you could say, oh, well, it's just accessories. How much fatigue is it going to be? No, sure. It's 1 or 2 exercises, but it's disproportionately fatiguing relative to the stimulus. Basically, we have pretty clear research that you basically, although the stimulus is greater if you go to failure, and you will get more of the stimulus the fatigue is exponentially greater. Essentially up to 2 RIR, basically the training between, you know, that 5 to, you know, 8 RPE is essentially where you're going to get the best max, you know, best bang for your buck for a recovery relative, for a stimulus relative to fatigue. So I would do less failure frequently during the week. You know, he does do some, like, you know, lots of try sets and super sets, which is fine, but that can cause some, you know, again, I think that's totally fine, like far out from like a competition to test that you're trying to improve work capacity and whatnot. But I think that closer and closer to me, again, I would get it more specific with overload and whatever. I think it's going to be a little bit better. And then it also trains at the upper end of volume tolerance for most people, and that basically means that there's likely lots of junk volume on accessories that could be better spent progressing from more general exercise selection to more moderate volumes. Basically what that means is most of your, the average volume is like over 20 sets per week, and James Krieger has done analyses of basically most people are going to respond well to 10 and 20 sets per week, and there's a U-shaped graph relationship with volume. So essentially up to a certain point, you know, basically up to your maximum recoverable volume or whatever, you're going to be able to see better gains. But there's going to be a point where you're still making gains, but it's less than you would because it's disproportionately fatiguing. And then more and more, and it just goes down. So it seems for most folks, the best bang for their buck is going to be spent between 10 to 20 sets per week on average. So I would say that it's just too much volume that's going to interfere with your ability to actually overload week to week. That's something else to really consider. And there's also, like I said, no singles on squats after week 4 or on bench like week 7 approaching the max. That doesn't really make sense to me. I would keep in the single the entire time like it does on deadlift, and just keep that all the way in. So if you're running this program, I would probably, you know, linearly progress that single throughout the entire time. It just doesn't really make that much sense to me. I feel like if you're going to keep it in from the beginning, like start with like a lower RPE, like 5 to 7 for that volume block for the first 4 weeks, and then maybe when you go into more intensity based block, which should be more or less the last 4 weeks, maybe you progress from a 7 to like a 9 to like an 8.5 to 9 RPE, and then you test an RPE 10 on that like week 4. That's what I would do. So the third principle of good programming is going to be fatigue management, and this is basically going to be the principle that training basically causes both fitness and fatigue. So for every single unit of training volume that you do, you get bigger, you get stronger, whatever. But there's also going to be fatigue generated from that. It has to be paid. It has to be paid off. And there's fatigue also accumulates and needs to be dealt with via like rest days, light sessions, exercise variation, that type of thing. It's essentially the process of applying and removing stress to make like when you have to, or to have the best gains. So what it does well is linear periodization. So linear periodization kind of has fatigue management built into it, because if you're progressing from like, you know, also, so just backing up, linear periodization with a submaximal overload emphasis, which is really good because if you're training within that 6 to 8 RPE range, which it does, like for example, you're going to be overloading with 90 to 92.5% of your max, or like 85% of your max, for 4x3 on week 6, which is starting, you know, like that's like within a 7 to an 8 RPE for most folks. That's really good. That's a really great way to progress, manage fatigue, make sure that you're still training hard, getting a good stimulus, and then it's going to just basically be going heavier and heavier and heavier, but sub-maximally. So that's really good. That's probably going to mean that you're going to get a really good stimulus, but not have fatigue be so crazy from the session that, you know, you can't survive, you can't overload. Now that's about where it stops. Again, there's no automated regulation with overload via RPE, so you can't basically take advantage of your really good day. So you're feeling really strong on one day. Well, you have to stick with 75% of your max for like this set of 6. Say that feels really heavy for one day. It's like RPE 10 because you just had shit sleep, you got in an argument with your girlfriend, like whatever. Like you don't know how to auto-regulate that. So incorporating some RPE would be really good for this program. And then again, the biggest problem with this is just going to be there's more volume than necessary. Lots of junk volume. You know, average 20 more sets per week for muscle group. That's just too much for most people. Most lifters do better with backing off it between 10 to 20 sets per week. And honestly, my preferred approach is like start on the lower end around 10 to 12 sets per week. If you're able to make progress at a predictable rate, that's good. And you're able to stay safe and not get hurt, that's really good. And then you should only add volume when it's needed, and it should only be like a 10 to 20% increase, which is going to be like 1 to 2 sets, like progressively over time across your training career if needed. Because more sets is not better. What we want to find is that maximum effective dose that's going to make us be able to progress predictably without having fatigue accumulate too rapidly. And we want to be able to make sure that we are able to progressively just get better and not get hurt. Like one of the biggest differences between people that get to the top level, people that don't, is just people that get hurt, people that don't. And doing tons of volume, while it might be a lot of fun, you gotta think long term, you gotta think in terms of longevity. We're not trying to get as strong or as jacked in one training cycle. It's across years. It's across, Russell's been training for like over a decade. That's why he's so strong, besides the fact he's a genetic freak. So that's what I would change with fatigue management. Again, it does well with linear periodization and submax overload, which is really good. I don't say that with many programs, but again, there probably needs to be some more auto regulation, so a little bit more volume than necessary. I would also incorporate probably after week 8, just like some instruction on how to like actually like do a deload, like fully deload before you just start the program again if you're going to restart it. That's what I would recommend doing. So basically like reduce the volume and in half, lower intensity to like 90% of what you were lifting on average. That's what I would basically do. Or just take a week off after it. Just tell people to take a week off. Like that could be even good. These are going to be pretty fatigued after an 8-week training cycle. The fourth principle is going to be SRA, which is stimulus recovery adaptation, which is going to be the process where you basically you're going to be getting bigger and stronger. It's basically you present a stimulus, you start to recover, and then you start to adapt to it, and then that's how you get bigger and then you get stronger. So the pros that it does is that there's a variation in loading ranges across the week. That's great. That means that you're going to be, you're not training RPE 7 all the time. You're doing like one session, it's like RPE 7 to 8. The other session is going to be RPE like 6 to 7 or something like that for the volume. That's really good. That's going to make sure you're getting enough volume. You're not going to be beating yourself up. You're going to be promoting some neural recovery, a little bit more muscular recovery, but still getting in enough volume within the overload threshold, the overload range to get bigger and to get stronger. That's what it does well. One thing I would say is that I would potentially add in a third bench day for some more volume or technique practice towards the end of the block. Maybe replace that day 6 with whether it does like cable crossovers and dumbbell press as the main chest movements, to doing more, to maybe adding some more light bench volume. That could really help. Some maximum, maybe you're doing like day 1, it's like RPE 7, RPE 8 average in intensity. Day 2 of benching will be RPE 7 average in intensity. Day 3 will be RPE 6 with some extra volume to add in some more practice. Because again, one component of SRA is not just muscle recovery, it's not just neural recovery. Like neural recovery takes the longest, which is why there's support for powerlifting programs to have variations in loading and actual intensity. Muscle recovery is going to be the second longest, but usually it's going to be within like, basically the more training that you get, you can recover faster. But for more, it's basically going to be between 12 to 48 hours. A good proxy for that is like soreness. How sore do you get? How sore are you still? And then like there's also going to be like technique, and technique decays pretty rapidly, and bench is a little bit more of a technical lift and usually needs a little bit more volume to really peak and progress well. So that's what I would probably add in more towards the end. And then like I said, I'm not going to be a dead horse, but I just think it's just too much volume in general with overall muscle groups. I would lower it down a little bit to more of that 10 to 20 sets per week range. Probably be a little bit more around the middle of the road with that. So that's what I would say about SRA. Now the fifth principle is going to be variation, and variation is just going to be the break in linearity of the training process, and adding in different stimulus is basically periodization. So again, like pros, linear periodization, you're going to have variations in loading across the training week. It's going to progressively get heavier. You're just going to make sure you're constantly able to adapt, get bigger and stronger, and go from more general development, more muscle hypertrophy, more work capacity related stuff, to getting to more of the technique of heavy lifting and neural qualities of a well-run max. There's also non-linear training week in terms of intensity, and rep range is used as a consequence of that. There's also just lots of different exercises that's going to be great for general hypertrophy, because more variation, like different exercises are going to hypertrophy and grow different parts of muscle heads to a greater extent than others. So that's a really, really good thing that it does do. However, I would say that it's very too much. Again, the bi-weekly change and in accessory work is just kind of strange to me. I would do less of that. I would have it be more consistent week to week, and then maybe change it halfway through. That would be good, because again, another purpose of variation is to help maintain adaptive sensitivity, but also prevent staleness, which can contribute to some psychological burnouts. You get kind of bored, and if you don't like your training, you're not going to try as hard. And then also just reduce overuse injuries. So that's something I would do. And then again, I don't see a change in specificity with getting more competition specific with exercise selection over time. And it drops out the singles for no reason, halfway through the program on squat. I don't understand that. So that's variation. And the next one is sixth principle is going to be phase potentiation, which is just going to be basically saying that different phases of training, you're going to go from more of a high volume phase or a volume focused phase to more of an intensity focused phase, closer that you get to competition. And essentially, again, bigger muscle can equal stronger muscle when it's trained later. If you have a higher work capacity, you can probably recover better with lower volumes, pushing more intensity later. So that's kind of what phase potentiation is. Again, the linear periodization kind of has it built in. You build all those underlying systems of strength. There's also very general far outs, which is really, really good in terms of exercise selection. Lots of different accessories. You're not going to, lots of volume. Good with that. But my biggest con is that I feel like it's more of a general hypertrophy program with progressive loading on the squat, bench, and deadlift. And I think it would be just better if it became more specific and less varied over time, because one principle is that phase potentiation is that it should get more specific over time in terms of exercise selection, intensities, volumes, whatever. So that's something that I would definitely say that it should improve upon. But because Joey, more modern periodization is a little bit less truncated. It's more truncated than block as opposed to how it used to be. But again, I would just still say that's something that it could do. It could, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with variation and all these other principles. They all build upon each other. That's why a lot of this stuff can kind of sound like I'm saying the same things towards the end. But again, I would just have more specific exercise selection, have a little bit, also on accessories, maybe have a little bit of a lower average rep range on that. That's going to also help, contribute to what the adaptations that we're seeking, prevent staleness, whatever. So that's what I would say about phase potentiation. The last one is going to be individualization, which is just going to be, how individualizes the program to you and your own individual response to your lifestyle, your adaptive capacity, proclivity. And the pros that it has percentages based on individual maxes, which is good. It's going to not just, it's going to basically be, you can just plug in whatever, what your maxes are. Russell says get your maxes before the program. Run these percentages, do you think the percentage range that he prescribes on these lifts, and progress with that. That's great. It means that anybody can really run in from any strength level, get bigger and stronger, which I think is a huge part of powerlifting. Powerlifting meets are really, really cool because everybody's just happy to see each other lift. That's really, really awesome. And I think more and more people should get into powerlifting, and they run this program. They kind of like getting heavier lifts. They like getting bigger and stronger. Then that's really awesome. I would say though that again, the con is just it's a template program. There's only so much that you can't individualize outside of percentages and RPE, which it doesn't do. I also do RPE. I'm also told that before. But besides that, there's just a template. It's not going to give you the best overall results. I would say that if your templates are better suited for more so beginners and early intermediates, because they can still, their range of what works for them is just so wide as you get more and more advanced. If you're probably a true intermediate lifter, you're probably going to want something more custom than this. It's probably going to be better suited towards your individual needs, volume tolerances, etc. So that's basically, and that's why high level lifters, they do not run template programs. They have coaches. They have customized training cycles, etc. That's why I have a coach. I don't just run a template. So yeah, that's my review of the program. My general consensus on it is basically be, if you do want to run it, it's fine. I think that you'll see some good results from it. I would probably reduce down the accessories a little bit. I would include singles throughout the program on the primary days, which would be day 1, 2, and 3, all throughout the program. Kind of basically whatever you do on squat, I would do the same thing with like bench in terms of singles, just because the response with training with squat and bench is more similar than deadlift. And then I would probably just auto-regulate training volumes and lower down the accessories to probably 2 or 3 sets per workout. Maybe don't do as many sets to failure. And you know, really listen to your body. Like if you're feeling beat up just because you're doing all of this volume that he does prescribe, like it's like definitely look at just lowering down the set volume a little bit, because it's not that you're not, you know, that's not like you're a little limp. It's just that you're a unique individual and you need to adapt things for your own best results. And if you're not able to, you know, recover and adapt, you constantly feel lethargic and beat down and sore, you know, that's not a good thing. But I do think this is just, it's generally overkill for most people with the accessory work. I think that you can progress with far less. If you compare like most training volumes of this program to, you know, what most elite level bodybuilders do, even like enhanced dudes, they're not doing this much volume. They don't need to do this much volume. You probably don't need to do this much volume. So I would recommend, probably, again, I've told us about the David Lade review video, but run like one of my free programs. I have a free beginner program for powerlifting, a free intermediate program for powerlifting. I think it'll be better suited for people. I think that I also have a free hypertrophy program that would be better suited for more people who are in the beginner to early intermediate stages. TSA has great programs. They have a beginner approach and an intermediate approach. And then, you know, 3DMJ, if you buy the muscle and strength pyramids, have, you know, which, you know, they have some free programs. You can kind of compare volumes. I also would compare, when you guys are looking at programs, look up, you know, some pre-standard programs like a 5x5 or Mad Cow or Texas Method or 531 or insert X generic template program that's been around for a long time, and compare it. It's like those are programs that have been around for a long time because they work pretty well generally for most beginners and early intermediates in the population that they're actually catering to, and then compare it to like a program like this, like Shiko, for example. Like you kind of see like how he does it and whatever. Like that could give you some good insight on whether or not a program is good or not. But essentially, if you want to run this program, that's my advice. I still would probably choose something different. Like I said, I already mentioned the programs I recommend. But I'm not saying you can't make progress on this if you're a beginner or early intermediates. I would just lower down the volumes a little bit and change what I said. So hopefully this makes sense. If you guys like the video, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. If you guys want to apply for coaching, links down below. Talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.